Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Planning and Development Management Committee meeting today, Wednesday, the 26th of September. Do we have any apologies?
So yes, Convener, we have apologies from Councillor James, Councillor Coates and Councillor Guay, with Councillor Dugan substituting for Councillor Guay.
Thank you. Welcome, Councillor Dugan. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, and I would like to introduce the top table. I'm going to come along from right to left. We have Mr. Niven, Mr. Scott, Mrs. Conliffe, myself, Mr. Elliott, Vice Convener Councillor Bob Braun, and Mr. Williams from Democratic Services. Do we have any declarations of interest on the proceedings today? No. Thank you. The deputations. We have been advised of 2 deputations from applicants from item 512 and 513. Can I ask the committee if you're in agreement to hear the deputations today? Agreed. Thank you. And now the minutes of the meeting of the Planning and Development Committee from the 29th of August. Do we agree those minutes? Agreed. Thank you. Thank you very much. That brings us on to the first item of business today, which is alterations and extensions to a hotel and erection of a staff and manager's accommodation unit with garage at Westlands Hotel, 160 Athol Road, Pitlochry, PH 165AR. And I would like to ask Mr. Niven to introduce the report.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, this application relates to the Westlands Hotel, which is located on Athol Road, just west of the centre of Pitlochry. The existing hotel is a large 1.5-storey Victorian building, which presently accommodates 18 bedrooms. The building is not listed, but is located within the conservation area of Pitlochry. To the rear of the hotel, there is also a 1960s bungalow, which is used presently for staff accommodation. The proposals are seeking consent to alter and extend the existing hotel building and to construct a new staff accommodation block and garage to the rear of the hotel. The proposed extension and associated alterations will provide an additional 18 bedrooms, creating an increase in capacity from 18 beds to 36 bedrooms. The proposals will also see the demolition of the unsightly 1960s staff accommodation at the rear, with a new traditionally designed 2-storey staff block constructed within the rear grounds. In addition, the plans also include the formation of additional parking within the site. This is a view looking across the eastern side of the site, the car park. As it is at present, there's no bays marked up, but this is where the existing car park will be reformed with additional bays provided. You can see there on the left-hand side, that is the eastern gable elevation. You can just about see the bungalow as well in the background and the extended grounds rising up towards the neighbouring property you can see just above the site. Again, this is a view looking back towards the rear of the hotel. As you can see, there are a number of latter extensions to the buildings. These will all be removed and the extension will be formed, projecting out the rear towards the existing bungalow at the rear of the site. This is a clearer photograph of the existing bungalow that is used as staff accommodation. It's split into 2 blocks rising up the site itself. This bungalow will be completely demolished. The extension will come up to just about the point of the first part of the bungalow that you see just beyond the car that's parked there. This is a view of the site of the new staff accommodation block. The staff accommodation will be situated largely over the grassed area there, being built onto the existing wall that you see there. And this finally is a view looking back towards the Athol Road direction. The rear of the hotel can just be seen beyond the existing bungalow that will be demolished. And finally, this returns back to the plans. Thank you.
Thank you. May I ask members, do they have any questions for officers on this application? Councillor Wilson, thank you.
Good morning. Thanks, Convener. I'm grateful for the sight of the trees. I wasn't clear in the report if we had to put in a condition about the trees. I think the trees are to remain, is that correct?
Yes, there's one tree that will be removed, and it notes in the report that that part of the landscaping scheme will to reintroduce that tree in an appropriate location, but the remaining trees will be protected.
Okay. Are there any proposals to plant extra trees, if there's any opportunity to do that?
Well, the plan, as you see there, is the plan that we have just now, but there will be a landscaping plan that will be produced as per the condition states, which may have additional planting in it, but the officer at the time will have to make that assessment as to whether additional landscaping is required. But in this instance, there's only one actual tree that's coming out, and the officer has mentioned that he saw fit that that additional tree would be put in, but that doesn't necessarily mean to say that more landscaping might come forward.
Okay, Convener, that takes me neatly to page 37 and the proposed condition 4. And the tail end of that says, the scheme is agreed and implemented shall thereafter be maintained. I know this sounds a bit like a squeaky record, but could we, Convener, please add in the wording to the satisfaction of the Council as Planning Authority?
Yeah, that wouldn't be a problem.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Do we have any comments on the report? No. Do we have a motion? Well, I will put forward the motion that it goes forward as approved with the addition of, with Councillor Wilson's addition.
I'd be happy to second that.
Thank you. Do we have any amendments to the paper? No. Then the motion is carried and the paper is approved. Thank you. Thank you. That brings us on to the second item of business, which is an erection of 2 holiday accommodation units and 3 camping pods at Tay View Lodges in Guay. And we have Mrs. Conliffe, who is going to speak to the application.
That's it. Got the microphone on now. This first shot shows the proposed layout, which is 2 new lodges. One you'll see up at the eastern end of the site, which is at the top of the screen, and one down in the western area, which is down at the bottom of the screen. There is also the 3 pods, which you see just in the middle of the picture towards the southern end of the site. The proposal for the one to the east, that's the one up beside the existing lodges, and is proposed slightly smaller than the existing ones, and then the one at the western end is proposed primarily for a manager's property, but would also be available for holiday accommodation. This shows the site as it is at present. You can see that there's quite a lot of room between the lodges, car parking area. It's a very neat and tidy site. And just moving on, this is one of the existing lodges just at the entrance to the site. This is bigger than the ones that are proposed. This is currently a 4-bedroom unit, whereas the proposed units are in fact 2-bedroom units. And this is showing from further down the site, down towards the western end, looking up through the site, across the drainage area, and to the location where the lodge that I showed on the original shot would be. So it's up, you see the 3 to the sort of left-hand side, and it's just to the right of that. This is from the western end looking back across the site where the area approximately is for the camping pods, which are small units. Oh, hang on. Which are small units that would accommodate just 2 people. They're a domed shape building, timber framed. This is from the car parking area looking down through the site across the drainage area. This is a private drainage plant which has the reed beds and soak away, so it takes the drainage for the existing units, and it will be the same system for the new units. And this one looks down through the site in a westerly direction down to the area where the other lodge was, which will be primarily for a manager's accommodation, but as I said, would still be possible for holiday accommodation. And we're just back to the layout that I showed at the start. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I ask Mr. Morton to come forward to give the deputation? Welcome, Mr. Morton. Thank you very much. If you wouldn't mind taking the podium there, that would be lovely. You'll have 5 minutes, sir, to say what you would like to say.
Okay.
And if you're okay to have a few questions after that, that would be lovely.
Fine.
And you'll be notified when you've got 30 seconds to go. 1 minute to go.
A minute to go, right.
Okay. Thank you very
fine.
much.
Yeah, you'll need to excuse me. I'll read off some notes that I've taken. In support of the planning application, I would like to say that Linda and I, my wife, have been involved in the hospitality industry in Perthshire for 23 years, running successful small tourism businesses in Burnham and now in Pitlochry. On our first visit to the lodges, Linda and I fell in love with the site and knew immediately that here was an underused facility with huge potential, which with hard work could be built into a successful business. Linda and I both know the tourism industry in Highland Perthshire very well and decided that our key market for the lodges would be a family market, as the site is central to all that Highland Perthshire has to offer and also offers a safe environment where parents can relax and children can play outside in the open spaces within the site boundary. One of the lodges is also fitted out to be fully wheelchair and disabled accessible. However, it was never marketed by the previous owners and rarely used by disabled visitors. We quickly realised that this lodge represented an opportunity to tap into a market that is underprovided for in Highland Perthshire. We are now successfully marketing this lodge and are receiving many bookings from families where a child or family member is wheelchair reliant. We are also now receiving bookings for respite breaks and have recently accommodated a young lady from Aberdeen with her 2 carers and a young lady from Dundee who required 24-hour care and brought 3 carers with her. We would hope at some point in the future to be able, subject to planning, to add another accessible lodge to the site. The main business of the previous owners came from offering cheap accommodation to groups of ex-girl brigaders and stag and hen parties. This market, however, is not in any way compatible with the markets we are looking at. We immediately stopped taking bookings for stag or hen bookings from the outdoor activity companies that previously sent bookings, and I can assure the committee that since taking over the site, we have not accepted or received 1 booking for a stag or hen party from any of these companies, and we have not accepted any direct bookings through our website. Tourism is a hugely important part of the economy of Highland Perthshire, and self-catering is an area that offers huge potential. Along the A9 corridor, Burnham, Inver, Loggerate, Bridge of Tilt and Blair Athol all have holiday sites much larger than Tayview lodges and all have a much higher unit density than we are proposing in our plans. Our unit density on site, if permission is granted, will be about 1 lodge per quarter acre, which I would argue would not be described as overdevelopment. Prior to the planning application, we had an excellent relationship with the local residents, and when we were lodging our application, I went to several of their houses to speak to them, show them our plans, and give them the opportunity to voice any concerns. None of them voiced any concerns or indicated they felt they had a reason to object. When we took over the site, one resident, Mr. Phillips, made it clear he would come and speak to me directly should any noise or disturbance be caused. Our relationship since then has been very good, and in fact he recently came onto the site to offer his drone to take aerial video pictures of the site to use on our website. Mr. Phillips has only felt the need to complain on 1 occasion about noise disturbance. I see Mr. and Mrs. Russell, Mr. and Mrs. Davis, and speak to them regularly on the site. I spoke to Mr. and Mrs. Glanville when they were up at their holiday home the last time, and they asked me if we would sell them a piece of the ground for the garden. Everything has seemed fine. However, Linda and I could go on, however, the fact that none of the local residents, apart from Mr. Phillips, has found it necessary to come and speak to Linda or myself directly about any of the issues or problems they claim now all of a sudden to be experiencing. Given all of the above, Linda and I have been extremely surprised and very upset that we are now having to defend ourselves against all sorts of clearly ludicrous, untrue or greatly exaggerated claims. It is perhaps worth noting that none of the residents of Guay cottages, which are 3 cottages that all lie closer to to the lodges and most of the objectors, neither of these felt the need to object in any way.
You have 1 minute, sir.
1 minute, okay. In this age of the internet, everyone is eager to use review sites to let the world know if their experience is good or bad, whether it be on holiday in a coffee shop or on a lodge site. If problems existed at our site, even remotely as bad as the objectors are claiming, then you can be sure that this would be reflected in our online reviews. In support of my case and to give the committee an objective view of the running of the lodge site, all I ask is that the committee take a look at our online reviews. Booking.com, we are at a 95% guest rating. On Free to Book, we have 4.9 out of 5 guest rating. On TripAdvisor, we had a 5-star guest rating. On none of these sites or on any other site will you see any negative comments or complaints whatsoever regarding noise, rowdy groups or any of the other objector claims. In closing, I would like to stress to the committee that Tayview Lodge is a well-run, well-managed and well-maintained holiday site owned by a local family who work on the site on a daily basis, employ local labour, use local companies and contribute greatly to the local economy. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
If you could just stay there a wee second,
yeah.
and if there's any questions from committee.
Okay.
Committee, do you have any questions for Mr. Morton? Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you for that clarification, Mr. Morton. First of all, can I thank you for your consideration to people with disabilities, and that's a credit to you, and I very much appreciate that you've taken that consideration. As to the concerns that some of your neighbours may have with regard to potential noise and disturbance, and your plans to have a warden in place, it was also mentioned by Mrs. Conliffe during her presentation that it could be used, that chalet could be used for guests also. Can you give the committee some idea of in what circumstances you would move the warden out in order to accommodate additional guests, and would that not be potentially at least the very situation where there might be noise disturbance if you're full and there's no warden in place?
Yeah. There's no plans to use it for a holiday lodge. I mean, it's I can't see any circumstances where we would move out and leave it for holiday lets and use it for holiday lets. The lodge will be occupied most of the year by Linda and myself. We plan to move down to the site. It makes it easier to meet and greet the guests, and if there is any potential noise or problems which will arise occasionally, I suppose, in a site like this, we'll be on hand to go up and speak to them and put a stop to it. But can I just say, for the last year and a half when we've been there, one of the local ladies that we employ was the site warden for the 5 years previous. And she has been our ears and her eyes at the site. She stays just at the bottom of the entrance, so she's our ears and her eyes, and she would phone us if there was any problems at the site that she felt we needed to come down, and we can be there in less than 10 minutes if we needed to come down and deal with them. She hasn't had to phone us once in the year and a half we've been in. So there's no an existing problem at the site with noise, and if Linda and I can be at the site in this lodge as we plan to be, I can assure you there won't be one in the future.
Thank you, that's reassuring.
Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Mr. Morton. On page 52, paragraph 48, how do you intend to monitor or control the use of the recommended fuels for the stoves that's going to be installed?
The wood burners?
Yes.
In the 2 lodges? Well, one of them will be Linda and I, so we'll obviously burn the correct stuff, but we'll have logs on site which we'll make available to the person in the lodge. It's only one of the letting lodges that's going to have a wood burning stove in it. So basically we'll make it clear in the booking conditions and also in the site rules and regulations, which everybody gets a copy of when they arrive, that the fuel we're giving them is the only fuel to be used. Yeah.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to know.
Okay,
thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Wilson.
Good morning, Mr. Morton. Hello. You mentioned that you had declined to take bookings from agencies who do stag and hen parties. How do you prevent somebody just phoning up and saying there's a big family group of us coming, and we're booking 2 lodges and there's 12 of us, and a apparently looks like a family booking, but might not be. How
Yeah.
how do you? I can understand how you deal with agencies, but how do you deal with individual booking?
It's difficult to sort of 100% be sure of that, but we on our site we don't allow bookings directly on our site for more than one lodge at a time. If there's bigger bookings, then they have to contact us direct, and then we make sure or we ask them the questions, and we have turned down numerous bookings from larger groups, not necessarily stags or hens, but larger groups. We had an inquiry yesterday from a previous resident that wanted to take 4 lodges for her mother's 60th birthday, which we turned down. We didn't take that. So we monitor the bookings as they come in, and we're pretty careful. We're pretty careful. But that's not to say that some single-sex groups won't be booked. That they won't be large, 4, 6, or maximum 8. And if we know they're a stag party, and then we don't accept the booking.
Okay, I'm aware that there's a proposal to dual the A9 nearby you.
Yes, I can't wait.
Okay. You've answered my question, I think. I'll ask the road service this one as well, but presumably the debate about where the road's going to go round about you, and I've not kept up with the detail of that, I must admit. Will that make it easier to have access?
Yes,
Right.
much easier. It'll be much better and much easier for people that don't know the road too well, and the access to and from the site is going to be much better.
Okay, and safer.
And much safer.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's the main thing.
Yeah.
You said you live 10 minutes away. Where is that?
Pitlochry.
Okay.
We live in Pitlochry at the moment. Yeah.
Right, and you did say you intend you and your wife to be on site yourselves.
Yes.
Does that mean that the lady who's been looking after the shop, if I might call it that, will not be doing that, or will she be doing it as well as yourselves?
No, she works for us. She'll continue to work for us.
Right.
She's one of the girls that cleans the lodges with my wife and my daughter. They both clean the lodges.
And you?
But she lives next to the site and has always been the site warden there for the girls' brigades since the lodges were built in 2012.
I think the concern for us is, whilst you operate the business in a certain way, the planning conditions have got to recognise that you might not always be operating the business, and we need to introduce whatever reasonable controls we can to make sure it's properly managed. Okay, thank you, Convener.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Braun, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morton.
Okay.
Thank you for your presentation. Just a couple of things. I read in the press very recently there was a mention that fires are being set in the woods. Now, is that related to sort of hen and stag parties?
No,
they made it clear that these things are happening. So
yeah, no, that was when we first came in. Just after we first came in, one of the local residents came across a campfire that somebody had set and proposed to light in the woods. I would imagine.
Right.
He seemed to think it was children for the site, which it possibly could have been, but it possibly couldn't have been. There was no way of knowing. But following that, we increased the rules and regulations regarding naked fires and flames, and we extended it to the surrounding woods, and asked parents, and we asked parents when they arrive to make sure the children are aware of the dangers of any setting fires or candles, etc., being set on the site or off the site. So we monitor that very carefully.
Okay, and the other thing, if I may, Karina, very commendable, obviously, about the disabled access for the one of the lodges. Just to clarify, I knew the lodge was there, but it was I didn't know it was underused as much, and the potential for business was just to clarify, the new lodges you're putting in, will they have disabled access? Or
no, they're no large enough. The pods wouldn't be suitable for that, and the 2 other lodges are the dimensions of the interior rooms and things are quite small.
So did you say the pods would be able for disabled access?
No, they're not
too small.
No,
yeah.
They're too small to be.
Yeah. Okay, fine. Thank you, Karina. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Mr. Morton, thank you very much indeed. You can return to your seat. Thank you. Do we have any questions for officers? Okay, Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Convener. Just a question on the septic tank or the water treatment system and the drainage into the reed bed. Do we know that adding the extra pods and the extra chalets, that there's capacity there to allow it to still operate efficiently?
Yes, our understanding is that it does have capacity, but that will be a matter that will be dealt with through the building standards.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Convener.
Certainly, Councillor Wilson.
Councillor
No,
Brown, go first.
Councillor Wilson, and then we'll have Councillor Brown. Thank you.
My apologies, I forgot to switch off my phone. That's meant to be a train coming into the station. Yeah. I think my questions are, first of all, relating to the roads. Could I just ask a representative of Transport Planning if the view that Mr Morton showed, which I'm not questioning, but just for confirmation that the new road arrangement will provide a safer access, not just for this development, but for the settlement in general. That's my first one.
Certainly. Mr Salmon?
Good morning, committee. To answer, yes, the junctions at Guay and Dowley, as part of the overall A9 strategy, they will be removing all at-grade junctions. So they will be creating a left-in-left alt arrangement, which will facilitate much more safer traffic movements.
Just returning to the point I made to Mr Morton latterly, Convener, because I'm not questioning his integrity anyway. These sites can be sold on and different proprietors come along. Is it the view of the planning service that either, do we need anything in terms of planting and landscaping first? There's nothing in the recommendations about that, about conditions, and maybe that's not necessary. But I just wonder if there's any potential competency in having a condition, first of all, about the fuel burning facilities that Councillor Anderson mentioned about the fuel, because that could be introduced to other, it could be introduced to other lodges in the future, maybe without planning being necessary. And also, is there a general condition about noise that would be competent, just as a, I think, some safeguard to the future?
Thank you. Mrs Conliffe?
I'll try and answer them in the order that you put them forward to me, Councillor. The first one with regard to planting and landscaping, you would have seen with the photographs that there is significant mature planting around the boundaries of the site, and the current applicants have in fact planted some significant levels of hedgerows around the boundaries of the site. We are satisfied that as it is at the moment, that is sufficient in terms of the site. Should they do any within the area, obviously there's a very sloping site, but it does allow an open area for children playing around. We didn't think there was any requirement to put any additional requirement for landscaping within the site. So we're satisfied that the site as it exists at the moment is self-contained and visually acceptable. The second point on the fuel, we have an informative 7 on page 57 with regard to the stoves and the fuel. So we think that is sufficient to cover it. And the last point with regard to the noise, it's one of the things that we have thought about, but it's very difficult to try and enforce because you're looking at levels. And I think what we were more interested in was the layout of the lodges and the number of people that could potentially be on the site. And as the deputation said, there is a maximum number, and even the existing lodges, they used to be, when they were with the Girls' Brigade, the possibility of much higher numbers of people in a lodge. The layout has changed now, so they are down to 4 bedrooms, and what you've got is a maximum, I think it's existing, of 29 people that could be on the site if every lodge was at its maximum. And with the proposal, we're looking at an additional 14, which includes the applicant family on the site. So we're satisfied that the layout you've got a large area, it is contained, that it would be very difficult to impose noise conditions, and therefore we haven't put any noise conditions on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Braun.
Thank you, Convener. It was just a follow-up on another point that was made to do with the access road. I just wonder if I could ask our transport colleagues, the road that leads to the site, I think think there were some concerns that it might deteriorate with extra use. Looking at my plan, it obviously serves not only the site but other houses, and I just wondered if there was any comment to be made on that at all.
Mr. Salmon, do you have any comment?
The existing access road is a private road, so its maintenance wouldn't be a private matter and would be the responsibilities of those who are in control of it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, thank you, Convener. Just with regard to the potential noise problem, if there is such a potential, Mrs. Cunliffe, can you possibly clarify what the shortest distance is between any of the chalets and neighbouring residential accommodation?
Off the top of my head, the closest would then be the first pod that you see in the middle of the screen there, and to the boundary it's approximately 14 metres. What I would say with that little pod, it's timber. There are no windows on the elevation that looks towards the neighbouring property. The neighbouring property also sits lower than the site. And then when you're looking at the lodges, the nearest lodge is one of the existing lodges, because the new ones are obviously quite some distance away from, and you've obviously got a lodge first that you'll see at the top of the screen, and then the new lodge is further to the left.
Do we have any further questions? Sorry, Councillor Anderson.
Just one quick question. On page 51, paragraph 41, you refer to the ridge height of, I think it's the lodge at the top, but the south one, you don't refer to the ridge height. Is the ridge height the same for both lodges, considering it's slightly bigger, that one?
The ridge height is the same, yes.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? No, thank you. Do we have any comments on the application? No? Okay. Can I ask for a motion? Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I'm happy to move approval of the recommendation as presented.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Sorry, Councillor Anderson.
Happy to second.
Thank you very much. Do we have an amendment? No amendment. The application is therefore approved. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, thank you. All right, we're now on to the next application in front of us, which is alterations and extension to the rail yard, including associated works, revised design and layout, and addition of a welfare cabin at the yard on Morey Street in Blackford. And could I ask Mr. Scott to introduce the report?
Thank you, Convener. Before going into the presentation, I just want to provide committee with two updates to the report. The first of which is in reference to paragraph 2 on page 64 of your papers. Within that paragraph, the name of the road is incorrectly referenced. There's a typographical error. It should be the B8081, not the B801. So any reference thereafter within the report does or should correctly refer to the B8081. The second update is condition 19 on page 92 of the report. And the addition proposed, similar to one of the last items considered today, is to add within that condition to the satisfaction of the Council as Planning Authority. That's the updates that we have. So what I'll do is I'll take you through the presentation just to go over the proposal. What you see in front of you on the screen is a comparison drawing. So in effect, the bottom half of the screen is the existing layout as approved for the extant scheme, which was approved by committee in March 2016. So in effect, subject to discharging planning conditions, which the applicants have actually already commenced prior to the new proposal coming forward, you'll see that the former railway yard in Blackford station, the proposal then was to provide a goods yard for the distribution of the output effectively from the Highland Spring factory. So the upper part of that proposal is actually what we've got now. What you'll see is it's almost a case of spot the difference. It's in effect the same proposal, but there are configurations to the physical layout, and as well there are changes to the operational nature of the proposal. The top right-hand side of the screen, you'll see there's a key of amendments. You probably can't make that out in terms of the scale there, but it is actually entirely replicated in paragraph 4 of your report. So the summarising of the main changes are set out within that paragraph. What I'll do is I'll just highlight from the screen a couple of the main changes moving from west to east. So looking at the upper proposal, which is the proposal that we have in front of you today, you'll see that the railway connection at that location is proposed to connect from the western end of the site boundary onto the mainline network railway track, whereas previously it was actually on the eastern side of the plot. So there's an arrow, again, probably difficult to make out. But in effect, the new connection at the western end of the boundary reorientates the arrangements within the site, so it's a more efficient and quicker entrance and exit to the site by the locomotives. And because of that as well, this proposal would mean that the reversing of the trains from the eastern end of the site, as was approved previously, wouldn't mean now that the level crossing on the B8081 would actually have to close. So I like two of those changes. They're obviously a reconfiguration of the track, but also there is a knock-on effect. You'll see from the existing proposal that the core path diversion, the core path that came from Blackford up to the wastewater treatment plant, which is the series of circular cylinders on the plan there, it was proposed to go effectively around the new track. That no longer isn't necessary. However, because the connection to the railway track is effectively going over at the Panholes crossing, that is no longer an appropriate or viable location for the core path. So in principle, what's being considered here is a diversion of the core path, and the plan on the upper part of the plan you have there is a green dotted line. It's showing that potential diversion of that track, and that leads to a proposed railway bridge, which, as the papers in front of you note, has previously been approved very recently under delegated powers by Network Rail. So in effect, the conditions on the proposal allow for the fact of a temporary diversion of that track, and ultimately it would lead to a new path going towards the railway bridge rather than using the previous pedestrian crossing. Moving eastwards in the site, you can see again that there are changes in the physical nature. The laydown area and the crane area, there's a number of changes. It's shorter, slightly broader, the crane, you can see from the cross-section on the upper left and bottom left of your screen. The pads in themselves are slightly bigger in terms of their width, but as I say, shorter overall. So there's actually less of a hard standing area in that location. And that has implications in terms of the surface water management and the flood risk arrangements, as the report discusses. So there's less of a compensatory storage requirement within this proposal as there was previously, so less land take required for that. And also there's a less drainage load and capacity on the water that would be discharging to the Allen Water. And any discharge would be intercepted by a drain which runs along the southern part of the site. The green part that you can see on the proposal is actually an embankment, and within there's interceptors for the flood risk and for the drainage to remove diesels and petrol before it discharges to the Allen Water. Moving further to the east of the site, the proposed access you'll see on the far right-hand side of the screen. Effectively, that is the existing vehicle access, which would be upgraded for this proposal. And what that would allow is for the HGVs or other vehicles to effectively move the produce from the factory site into the railway goods yard across up Stirling Street and across the B8081. Other changes in that locality, you can see there's a red hatched area, probably just make that out. The proposal is to slightly increase that. That's the Network Rail facilities depot, and their access point onto the railway as well is also being changed to that location. So it's more rationalised in that respect, and the land take would be smaller for those purposes. And there is also an internal loading bay or waiting bay for a number of HGVs. Around about 10 of them can now be accommodated on the site, as was previously the case. So there would be no stacking on Stirling Street or further to the northeast on the B8081, which will allow for a more efficient use of the site. All in all, the number of vehicles that are being taken off the road, if you like, and going to rail as part of that modal shift are actually increasing as part of this proposal. Previously there was capacity for 10 wagons and there now are 11, so in effect it's an increase of 10% reduction of vehicles going through Blackford as a result of this proposal. This is a panoramic shot taken from the hill, the escarpment to the north of the application site. So what you can actually almost see here is from the left to right is the east to west spread from the application site. So on the left, which is the east, would be the vehicular access to the site. There would also be the operational area within the centre of the shot. And moving to the right, which is the west, would be you can just about make out where the rail connection would be, just as it crosses over towards the Panholes pedestrian crossing. This is just a single image shot of that panoramic, so you can see in slightly more detail. You can see the remnants there of the previous railway station, Blackford Station, and other buildings. It closed in 1956. It's being used as a goods yard in the control of Network Rail. And the proposal would be, you can see there's a boundary there which is delineated by the post and wire fence. That's the old station boundary, and the land beyond is also proposed to be included as part of this application site. And as the report notes, that's currently identified for protection as an open space area, but the proposal presented towards you today is to depart from that protection of that land for the greater benefit in effect that's being realised from taking the vehicular movements from road to rail. Again, this is just looking at centre of shot, so you can see some of the interaction with the existing land uses. There are obviously sensitive receptors within the vicinity, so here you can see there are residential properties within the more historic part of Blackford, and moving further over you see just beyond the trees Abercairney Place and Close. So great consideration within this proposal, as indeed there were with the last proposal, to make sure that noise and any other impacts in coming to the judgment of recommending for approval, that there are no adverse amenity impacts on residents, and the updated noise assessment comes with it updated noise mitigation measures, including a realignment of the 5-metre high noise attenuation fence. So again, this is just taken towards the west of the site. You can see extending beyond, there are residential properties beyond the tree, so a number of sensitive receptors, and the connection point, you wouldn't quite see it here, but this is in effect where the railway diminishes in the long distance. That's roughly where the new footbridge would be for the core path diversion, which would follow along the tree over the Allen Water and onward to the core path network to the north of Blackford. This is the last image. This is showing from the B8081, looking in at just actually to the south of where the proposed access would be, but just looking across from the site. So immediately behind this shot and to the left of the shot would be the existing goods yard and bottling plant for Highland Springs. So in effect, the traffic would be crossing over the road and accessing the site roughly at this location. And this takes you back to the comparison drawing, and just to clarify again, that it's the proposal in front for consideration is to the upper part of the plan, and the existing permission is to the bottom part.
Thank you. Could I ask Mr. Montgomery to come forward, and if you wouldn't mind coming to the podium, sir, thank you. You could have 5 minutes to give us the information that you have there, and then if you wouldn't mind staying there, and we could ask you some questions when you're done, and you'll be notified when there's a minute left to go.
Okay,
thank you very much.
Good morning. My name's Les Montgomery. I'm the Chief Executive of the Highland Spring Group. We're headquartered in Blackford, where Highland Spring's bottled before distributed across the UK to our customer base. We have 3 other production sites, 3 other bottling sites, 2 in Scotland and 1 in Wales, and we employ over 500 people across the business. Highland Spring Group is the UK's leading producer of natural source water, producing almost 1 litre for every 5 of bottled water consumed in the UK. And we're absolutely proud to be an ethical, responsible producer and have been named the UK's leading ethical bottled water brand by the Good Food Guide for the last 10 years running. The rail freight facility will enable Highland Spring Group to transport goods in an environmentally sustainable way, reduce our carbon footprint and remove approximately 40% of the current HGV movements from the village. The minor amendments for which we're seeking approval today result in significant benefits to the operational functionality of the site and crucially benefits to the local community. The key change is the way that the train will enter and leave the facility. The revised western access means that the level crossing will no longer need to close when the train enters and leaves the facility. There'll be fewer operational rail movements at the eastern end of the site where the primary school is located, and there'll be quicker entry and exit to the facility, providing noise and air quality improvements. Other minor amendments have enabled us to remove a further 2 HGVs from the village, with the size of each train now being the equivalent of 22 HGVs. We've held a public consultation. Highland Spring Group is committed to being a good neighbour and held a voluntary public consultation event in advance of this particular application being submitted. The event was well attended and provided the opportunity to share our proposals with approximately 80 members of the community attending. During the event, a suggestion was made that the community would benefit from a fruit orchard. This positive addition has now been incorporated within our plans. Regrettably, a small number of individuals are still opposed to the existence of a freight facility in Blackford. However, we were encouraged that only 3 objections were received in relation to this application. We believe this to be an indication as to how well the proposed changes were received by the community. The Highland Spring Group welcomed the support and positive responses from the Community Council. However, we would like to take the opportunity to address a few concerns raised. Firstly, noise impact. The primary concern of the community appears to be the noise impact of the facility. We have sensitively designed the facility to minimise the noise and visual impact on the community, and the installation of noise monitoring equipment will ensure noise limits are adhered to when the facility is operational. One amendment made was to reposition the acoustic barrier to ensure acoustic capabilities are optimised. And the need for the earlier train arrival is a result of train timetabling, which is out with Highland Spring Group's control. We've secured daily morning and afternoon train pass and are committed to an ambition of utilising the afternoon train first. There may be certain days when volumes would merit a second train, and our preference would be to utilise a second train rather than sending this volume by road. The revised noise assessment undertaken to support this application concluded that the revised western access provides a benefit in noise terms to the existing consent. The early train arrival would not result in any adverse effects upon the local community. We also note that the Environmental Health offer no objection after being consulted in these matters. In terms of HGV movement,
sorry, I do apologise. Your microphone seems to have gone off.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's important to make clear that the future traffic movements are educated estimates at this time, and volumes are influenced by market demand and subject to seasonal fluctuations, not by the proposals in front of you this morning. For this reason, we feel it's the most appropriate method for reporting volumes was to use annualised daily averages. So during peak times, the daily movements will be higher and conversely lower during the winter months.
You have 1 minute, sir.
Okay. Highland Spring Group understands how important access to the green space around Blackford is to the community, and the recent approval of Network Rail's footbridge can only be seen as a positive addition. The community have voiced their concerns about temporary core path diversions during construction works. We would like to provide assurances that the group and Network Rail will be coordinating our construction programmes and will endeavour to minimise any temporary disruptions caused by core path diversions where possible. With 75% less CO2 for every tonne of freight moved by rail instead of road, the freight facility will provide substantial environmental benefits through carbon reduction. Whilst we currently have an implementable consent, the amendments for which we're seeking approval today provide marked improvements operationally and considerable benefits for the local community. And we respectively request that the committee approve the application so all stakeholders can benefit from this enhanced scheme. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr Montgomery, thank you very much indeed. If you wouldn't mind staying there, we'll have some questions from the committee. Do we have any questions? Councillor Band.
Mr Montgomery, thank you for your presentation. Network Rail do not have the best reputation for keeping a tidy site. As we've seen, 1953, I believe, 65 years ago, that station was closed, and it looks like a bomb site. Will you, as an organisation, have any clout with Network Rail to keep that site a much more presentable state?
Well, we will, of course, work with the contractors and ensure that and we have a reputation of keeping a tidy site. We've gone through a recent upgrade to the site and it was kept tidy during that time. So we'll ensure the contractors would adhere to that as well. We want people approaching Highland Spring to feel good about approaching Highland Spring. We don't like when things look messy.
Thank you for that. But I'm more concerned about the ongoing maintenance of the area around there. As I say, the old railway station, the old platforms are still there, crumbling. Presumably these will all be removed to allow the new siding in.
Mark, these are Network Rail's responsibility, is that correct, Mo? Can I ask my colleague Mo? Mo's the project leader from our business and full-time on it and has been.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm happy for you to answer questions. Thank you.
The old sidings that are currently there will be are proposed to be removed by Network Rail before we start construction on site.
Thank you. Councillor Dugan.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you for the presentation. I think it's very welcome that this facility will enable a 40%, as I think was reported, reduction in HGV movements through the village. I'd just like reassurance, perhaps from officers, that there's nothing in this amended application that would affect the likelihood or otherwise of additional slip road to the east of Blackford.
Can I possibly ask Councillor Duggan if we revisit that question when it comes to the time for officers?
Okay.
We can certainly, I'm happy to do that. Do we have any other questions for the applicant? Councillor Wilson.
Good morning, both. What time would be the morning train, if it operates?
6:30, the train comes in. But
Okay.
as Mr Montgomery said, that we plan to utilise the afternoon train first, if possible.
So it would come in at 6:30?
Yes.
And go away at 6:30?
It goes away at 11:30.
11:30, okay. Right. But there are other trains passing by on the line?
Yes.
Yeah.
Between 6 o'clock and 7 o'clock in the morning, there are 4 trains currently that go past Blackford, 3 passenger trains and 1 freight train.
Okay. And the afternoon train is?
The afternoon train would come in at 5 to 4, so after the school has finished, and it leaves at 6:45 in the evening.
Okay. I think Mr Montgomery, convener, mentioned contractors, and I'm just now wondering who's going to run the yard, if I can call it that. Do Network Rail still own it in the future, or do you own it? And is there a firm who are going to be contracted to actually operate the yard? Because the planning conditions that we're potentially going to agree to today, convener, will be on the applicants who are Highland Spring, but these responsibilities will need to be passed on, obviously, to anybody who operated the yard. So could you tell us about how it's going to work in practical terms?
So it's a Highland Spring owned facility, and it'll be operated by our operators John G. Russell, and obviously we'll have, as part of our contract with Russells, we'll make sure that the site is well run, it's kept tidy, it's maintained, they adhere to all the conditions that will be imposed from planning for noise. We also have the operating hours, which will be adhered to.
Okay. And just one more question, convener. Lorries will go down to the yard during the day and leave the containers there, and then they'll be craned on to the train when it's in. Is that?
Yes, that's
how it
right.
works?
So the containers, the full containers will be taken from the factory across the road into the facility, where the crane will lift the full container, put it either directly onto the train or onto the storage area, and then will likely take an empty container and put it onto the lorry, and which will bring it back to the facility for us to fill.
Right, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson and then Councillor Anderson.
There we go, I'm switched on now, right? I just have a question. Obviously you've done a fair amount of community engagement already, which has given you a lot of useful feedback. Would I be right in assuming you will continue to do that in future? Because especially when there are contractors involved, and dare I say Network Rail involved, things don't always go as we might hope, because they're not a little bit out of your control. I hope that you continue to liaise with the community to see if everything does work out okay. And also, when things like core paths are being altered, it's always about to alter them a bit. There's an opportunity for, I would say, for developers to improve and enhance core paths at the same time, which I think would go down well with the community as well. Can we get an assurance that these things will be considered?
So the community relations are part of what we do and what we've always done good in any matter that affects people. So we'll continue to do that, and specifically on the rail side and in general stuff. In terms of the core paths, I'm not sure how that'll work.
So the core path, there's varying, obviously, views from the community. Some would like it to be kept natural, as it currently is. Some would like it to be maybe a path. So we'll discuss with the community, and it will be maintained by us. So in terms of upkeep and maintenance of the core path, it will be our responsibility, and we will make sure that those core paths are maintained and kept looking nice.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. To go back to Councillor Wilson's point about the time of the trains, you said a train would be in at 6:30 and it wouldn't leave till 11:30. Is this the full train, or is this not the rolling stock you're referring to?
So this is the train would come in at 6:30. Again, that's only if the volume dictates that a second train is required in that day. And then the train would be, the empties would be taken off and the full containers loaded onto the train, and it would leave full. So all 22 containers would be full.
So this means it's a complete train, engine, etc.?
Yes, yes, that's right.
And what is there enough mitigation for the fact that a large diesel locomotive will be ticking over from 6:30 to 11:30?
So what will happen when the train comes in, it will be in the facility, berthed, and the engine switched off within 3 minutes. It will then take about 75 minutes to load the back 7 wagons out of the 11 on the train. Only once that's done will the locomotive start up. It will run round on the second siding and reconnect at the other end and pull the remaining containers under the crane pad to be loaded and unloaded. And again, while that's happening, the train will be switched off, and it will only start up again when it needs to get in position to leave the facility.
And you have had an assurance from the operators that they can switch the locomotive off and on?
Yes.
Because normally goods trains, the large, very old-fashioned engines don't switch off.
If you would permit, our operator is here with us today.
I'm happy to accept that you've checked this, and that will be so noted. Are you happy with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Barnacle.
Thanks, Convener. Coming back to the core path right-of-way issue, paragraphs 93 and 95 of the report, how much could you, it says in paragraph 95, the ideal situation would be that the bridge is in place prior to the need for the existing crossing to be closed. Are you able to influence that at all?
So Highland Spring and Network Rail will coordinate their construction programmes. So we intend to dovetail with Network Rail. So once they are complete and finish their works, that would be when we would start. So the bridge would be constructed and open to the public at that point.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions?
Convener.
Sorry, Councillor Duggan, yes.
Obviously, very happy to take your advice, but I think I would actually like to hear the company's view on my question as well as Roads Officer's view. Thank you.
No, absolutely. Sorry, I took from your question that you were asking officers, and that's why I'm more than happy for that to be put across. Could you repeat the question again? Thank you.
You know, it's just to be assured that the changes within this amended proposal don't negatively impact the prospect of a future additional slip road off the A9 to the east of the village.
So we don't see how the two things can be connected or are connected. We definitely, we're in the public domain, are saying we're absolutely supportive of a slip road from the A9 if that can happen, and actively discussing it with lots of bodies. But I can't see how the two things are connected, so I can't see how one can negatively impact. A slip road, an A9 slip road would be great north of our business.
Okay, thank you. And is the officer's view consistent with that, Convener?
Certainly. If everybody else is finished with questions, I will ask the applicant to return to his seat. Thank you very much indeed, and open it up for questions from officers. And Councillor Duggan, if you wouldn't mind the question to the officers, could you please respond?
Yeah, the existing slip is 1.2 kilometres away, so it wouldn't have any adverse impact there. If there is a future proposal, I would concur with the applicant there in regard there wouldn't be a direct impact adversely. My perception would be because of the change in the locomotive movements, there'd be less closure on the crossing of the railway, so there'd be less likelihood for any backing up of traffic. So if anything, it'd probably be more free-flowing. Mr. Salmon could give a view.
I concur.
Very good to hear, Convener. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your understanding there. Now, are there any other questions for officers? Councillor Simpson, followed by Councillor Back.
Thank you, Convener. I have a question concerning the bridge connected with the core path and the involvement of our old pals Network Rail, who have a reputation of moving at an even more glacial pace than the arrival of a T-Cities deal, you know. Can any officer give me any reassurance we will ever see this bridge, and if so, when? And have we any powers to speed this up?
Mr. Elliott, thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Councillor Simpson, I've been involved in the background in terms of the diversion order that follows on from Network Rail's permission more than this one. And my understanding is Network Rail want to be on site as soon as possible later this year. Now that's no guarantee, but they have been certainly looking for progress to be made in the diversion order as quickly as possible. The other thing is, of course, there's a recommended condition here, and I think there's a condition in the other consent that there's a plan in place in terms of the timing of things. And I know that the community green space are very conscious of the timing of the closure, so the temporary closure is as short as possible.
I don't for a moment disbelieve Mr. Elliott. Can we get any further reassurance that we have any influence with Network Rail to produce this bridge?
Can we give any assurances that we have influence over Network Rail?
They have a planning permission in place. They're seeking to discharge conditions. Beyond that, there isn't a compulsion that they undertake it, but if they already have an extant proposal, so there is a diversion required for the core path already. This new proposal, if approved, would obviously haste that process. So they're doing things in the right way. One would imagine that they've got approval for the bridge. This proposal, if approved, the two need to be connected together in terms of diversion order, but we can't compel them to move forward, but signs are indicating that they are moving forward.
We can all just cross our fingers then.
Indeed. Thank you. Councillor Band, thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Would it be competent to add a condition somewhere along the line that, no pun intended on the line, but somewhere along the lines of making sure that these locomotives are switched off during those times? Because I've worked in and around the railway station at Perth for 30 years, and very rarely have I ever seen them switch off a heavy locomotive.
I believe there are already conditions recommended. There is actually an operational management plan required, and specifically condition 10 requires a noise management plan for the operations, which we require to approve prior to the commencement of the use of the site. So we would expect that kind of detail to be set out in terms of the operation of how a locomotive would come in, what would it do, and then before it goes back out again. So that condition would cover that exact scenario.
Sorry,
no, certainly.
Can we say, is there any sanction if they fail to adhere to that, switching the locomotive off after 3 minutes?
Well, in terms of what they put in their plan that we were approving, if they didn't comply with that, there is always the option enforcement action could be taken or any stop notices could be served if there was a consistent or a significant breach of that plan. So we would expect them to operate the site in compliance with all approved drawings and details for discharging of conditions. So there is an existing security within the enforcement process to do that.
Councillor Anderson.
Much on the same issue. Maybe it would be good for a comment from the environment officers here that if the engine was ticking over for, it looks like 5 hours, would this be a noise issue anyway?
Is that a noise or pollution issue regarding the engine being on?
I can't comment on that until an assessment was done. It depends on what type of locomotion it is, what engine capacity it has, and the distance it will be from residential. All I can say is that the noise impact assessment that was submitted took in the amendment to that noise, the original noise impact assessment took into consideration the nighttime period, and within that we were satisfied that the conditions that were set and amended conditions that we put in place for this application will be met.
If I could just add into just to supplement that, Convener, Condition 4 does set an upper ceiling limit for the operations of the site. So for the earlier hour operations from the 6 AM onwards, the 42 decibel is an average over that 15-minute period, and the upper end of the site would be 44 decibels for any other operational hours. So they are always going to be held to an upper noise limit regardless of the time of day, whether locomotives are on for slightly longer. So even when they are on, they need to still meet those limits. And just as my colleague said there, the noise impact assessment's obviously been modelled, and the acoustic attenuation's been designed in a way to make sure that the residents aren't adversely affected. So again, there are sufficient controls to make sure that that would not be exceeded.
Certainly, Councillor Anderson.
Can I just, noise receptors, are they going to be monitored by the company, or are they monitored by environment?
There is a condition requiring an operational noise monitoring, which is a scheme that we need to agree up front, and we can essentially look at that as and when required. And again, there's a further condition within the proposal for condition 6. If we were to receive any noise complaints from any noise-sensitive receptors, we've got the powers to compel them to undertake further studies or assessment at their own expense for our own independent review to make sure they're in compliance with the conditions.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
My question is a sort of process one in terms of planning, and I found that Mr. Scott's excellent summary of what that slide meant in terms of changes was really good, but I think it would have been even better, convener, if we'd had a copy of that, and maybe on the back of the copy just the summary that Mr. Scott gave. I realise you can't do that for every application, but this is a complicated, complex planning application with a lot of issues in it and a degree of controversy, and I would have found that helpful. I found the verbal presentation helpful, but having read it in the small hours of the night as we do, I would have found it even more helpful.
I understand that, Councillor Wilson. I do believe that all the information is online, but I certainly take hold of your points that it would be easier if that information might have been added to the application, but it is there for us to have a look at. But thank you.
Convener, I knew you would say that. I am fed up with people telling that things are online. We get a report to read, and we actually, some of us want paper and need paper because of our eyesight, quite bluntly. And I think I'm just saying that particular excellent diagram and explanation would, as an addendum to the report, would have been helpful. I leave that suggestion with you.
Absolutely, and I concur as somebody else who also has an issue with eyesight and computers. But thank you very much for raising the point. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, convener. Just to go back to the noise issues with an engine potential arriving at 6:30 in the morning, and item number 70, it's got that there is a number of residential properties which are noise sensitive. Just confirmation, does that just mean the location of the properties, or do they not have double glazing, or why are the noise sensitive? And having not sat through this when it's went through before, can I ask for a little bit more information on the acoustic barrier as well? You know, the distance from where the stock will be arriving to these houses, and what type of acoustic barrier will be in place, especially given the changes in the time of arrival of a train for early in the morning.
Okay.
Yep, to take your questions in the order. In effect, any residential property is something we would regard as a noise-sensitive receptor. So it's not an individual assessment of the installation within each property. So the overall noise assessment assumes that they are sensitive, and the noise impact assessment has to come up with a solution, such as the mitigation you refer to make sure the noise limits are not exceeded for any of those noise-sensitive receptors. In terms of the proposal, the comparison drawing you have in front of you, again, the detail is probably difficult to make out in terms of its scale, but there is along the entire southern boundary of the site a 5-metre high acoustic fence, which is the orange dotted line. So where you see the green band, that's like a bund, and then there's an acoustic fence there. So 5 metres is obviously a significant structure in itself. And where there is a lesser demand, i.e. where the noise-sensitive receptors are further away, that tapers down at the eastern end to a 3-metre high acoustic fence. So the requirement is for them to be in place before the site can operate. And again, as I explained for the other conditions, there is an ongoing monitoring requirement, and we can react to complaints. But we're very satisfied, given the level of detail, and this is a reassessment of noise from the previous proposal, that those solutions are adequate to mitigate all noise-sensitive receptors, so the school and residential properties.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions for officers? No. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Do we have any comments on the report? Councillor Duggan.
It's really a comment on the debate and the questions that have come, convener, and much of the discussion around idling locomotives has been about noise. I'd be far more concerned about the implications of any breach that would have and the effects that would have on air quality in the area, and I would urge officers to bear that very much in mind when they're trying to formulate. Hopefully there won't be any breaches, but in the event that they are, it's a very serious issue.
Absolutely agreed. Thank you. Are there any other comments? Councillor Wilson.
was going to move the report, convener, if that's appropriate.
It is appropriate, thank you very much.
I welcome this. I think there are, first of all, we have an existing consent, and as it has been adequately described, this alters it. I think it improves the consent. I think the applicants have taken account of some of the concerns in the community. It's not a perfect world, because this will involve a degree of traffic movement within the village, but there's a net reduction in lorry movements, and I think that will benefit the community and benefit the environment. I take on board the points made by my colleagues to my left, but I think this is the way to go. It's been a long story. I'm sorry Councillor Tom Gray's not here, because he, along with the leader of the council and former Councillor Anne Gaunt, have lived with this for some time now, and had to deal with the community impact of this proposal. But I'm happy to give it my support. I think we've had reassurances today that there's lengthy conditions. Some of them still have to be fully implemented, with various schemes coming forward for mitigation, etc. And I think the community in Blackford, which is an active and lively one, will make sure that the planning conditions are adhered to. I'm quite sure the applicants will as well, and I'm reassured of their arrangement with their contractor to make sure that the site is properly managed, unlike the dereliction that was described by Councillor Band earlier on. So I'm content to move the report.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Can I ask, are you happy with the additional amendments that were made at the beginning with Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Do we have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Barnacle.
Yeah, I'm happy to second the report. I think the important point is the use of the rail facility improving the situation, and I think that's, as Councillor Wilson pointed out, to be applauded. Thank you.
Do we have any amendments? No. In that case, the application is approved. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Okay, we have had another IT blip, so apologies. We're all going to have to crane our necks to do the next bit, as the screen in front of us has decided to go on a break. So if you'll excuse us while we do that, but the next application in front of us is an erection of a dwelling house, land northwest of Corby Lynn in Dysett Bray in Pitlochry, and it's Mr. Niven that is going to speak to the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. I firstly have one small update to make. Informative 11 is a repeat of Informative 5, so we are proposing that Informative 11 would just be deleted. It's just a typo, basically. This application relates to a plot of land located on Dysett Bray, Pitlochry, which is a private access leading off of Athol Road. The site presently forms part of the garden grounds of the applicant's existing residential property known as Corby Lynn, which is a traditional 1.5-storey dwelling. To the west of the site lies more modern bungalows, but the area features quite a broad mixture of house types of varying different styles and scales and finishes. Full plan permission is being sought to erect a 2-storey dwelling within the plot. The proposed house is a traditionally designed dwelling featuring timber windows, natural slate and wet dash walls. Its central position within the site will follow the existing building line of Corby Lynn and the neighbouring bungalow to the west. Access to the plot will be taken via Dysett Bray, with provision for at least 2 parking spaces and turning provided within the site itself. This first image is taken looking west towards the site. Corby Lynn, the applicant's property, can just be seen there on the left. The element you can see there is its single-storey extension, and the bungalows you can see there in the background further along the access. This is a view taken of the site from Dysett Bray itself, showing the full extent of the site. Corby Lynn on the left, and I believe it's 1 Dysett Bray on the right. This is a view taken from in front of the neighbouring bungalow, looking east towards the site. Again, Corby Lynn is in the background. And this is a view from within the site. Corby Lynn would be behind me, looking towards the neighbouring bungalows, and shows the full extent of the boundary with that neighbouring property. As you can see, the applicant has recently planted a hedge along that boundary, but the proposals do indicate that this fence will be increased in height to 1.8 metre. And this returns back to the plan of the site. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for officers on this application? No. Councillor Wilson, thank you.
Thank you. Landscaping and trees, page 107, convener. 38, the tree survey is requested. The proposed development will not require the removal of trees. Do we need any assurance about the protection of the existing trees either during the construction phase or thereon? I see, this is veering at the comments, but on page 110 we only have, I think, 2 conditions. So I'm just wondering if the consideration was given to a condition that would, about landscaping and trees, and I'd like advice from the officers on that, please.
Certainly, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, that was taken into consideration by the officer. As outlined in the report, he did not consider it to be a significant issue. The distances involved in the placement of the house should not risk those trees. The actual area hatched, well, should I say shaded in green, is the area which is quite densely populated with trees, but it's about a 45-degree angle. It'll be in their ownership, but their proposal is to retain that area, and it will not be used. It couldn't be used as garden ground effectively. But yes, I do note there are trees that are there. It is their proposal to retain those trees. But yes, it is possible that a standard condition about tree protection measures could be put in place in regards to those specific trees. But as referred to in the report, we did not consider it was necessary.
Follow up?
Could I maybe press that point? Because it's very easy to assume things, but I think if there is a condition about, particularly during the construction phase, there's always a danger of root damage, etc. Or this is Councillor Anders' subject, but a big heavy digger swinging around the wrong way, and always accidentally, of course, convener. But perhaps if the committee were minded to add that as a condition, there is a standard condition, I think that would be appropriate to do that. I think it'll also emphasise to the applicants our importance of this, like the previous application in Pitlochry, relies a lot on the landscape framework that's already there, and I think we should be seen to try and protect that. My other question, is that?
Yeah, certainly,
nodding?
Absolutely. I think if you want to respond to that.
Yeah, just to respond, yes, that's not a problem. We will put that condition on.
Thank you. My other question is about distance from adjoining properties. There was information given on some of the distances. Some of them seemed a wee bit tight to me. Would the planning officers like to comment on that?
Certainly. Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. Would you like to comment on that, please?
Yes, the property is located closer to Corby Lynn, which is the applicant's property. It's approximately 4 metres. But on that elevation, the gable elevation of the property, there are no windows. So the consideration is that there will not be any significant impact on their property. Now, as you'll probably appreciate with within that area, there's quite varying densities. In fact, on Athol Road, it's difficult to see, but just to the north of this site, there's a terraced row of properties. There's some properties that are within even less than that distance. And in terms of its the proximity to the neighbour to the west, on Auchterarder Bray, the bungalow, there'll be a distance of 9 metre between the two gables, but again, there are no windows on that gable elevation which would cause any interference with their amenity. So, as per the officer's view, it is considered that there should not be any significant impact on neighbouring amenity.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions? Councillor Jarrett.
Yes, I noticed in the report it mentions radon. I assume it's not actually a problem, though it can be in some instances. Is there any obligation on the developer, pardon me, on the developer to do any testing?
It's quite it's an issue that's prevalent in a number of different areas across Scotland. Aberdeen's one of the well-known ones, but effectively it's just ground-based gases from the geology of the area. But this is a note that's come through from Environmental Health. in effect highlighting the potential for it. But this is something that would normally be picked up by building standards in their assessment of the application, because they would normally put down a membrane, which I believe is quite a simple and straightforward thing to do. We've just put it as an informative note to raise it to their attention, but it will be picked up at a later stage during the building warrant.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Now, do we have any comments on the application? No comments. Can I ask for a motion? Okay, I'm happy to put forward the motion that this is approved with the addition of the Councillor Wilson's request on the trees. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Simpson is happy to second. Do we have an amendment on the application? No, then the application is approved. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, thank you. Now this brings us on to the proposal of application notices, the section. So the first one with us is in Rattray, a residential development, landscaping and associated works land to the east of Honeyberry Crescent in Rattray. I have already it's been mentioned to me that there are local concerns regarding traffic issues from the community, and I just want to note that that has been passed to me, and I have passed that on, and it will be assessed through the process if an application comes forward. Is there any questions or comments on this PAN notice? Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, I'm comforted to note that the key issues which will be addressed as part of any future application include both air quality and transport, and also that a statement will be required on the transport issues in particular. Can we please ensure that whatever report is eventually received by this committee, that it not only covers the local issues but also the wider implications of the continuing increase in residential development that side of the River Tay, and the consequences for Perth City and Bridgend in particular of the aggregate increase in traffic that will be generated, i.e. not just the Blairgowrie Rattray area, but further into the city as well.
That has been noted. Okay, do we have any other points to be raised on this? Are we happy to note the PAN? Thank you. Okay, we will move on to the next one, which is in Auchterarder. Minerals extraction and processing activities in part retrospect, including reinstatement, restoration, landscaping, processing, building and auxiliary accommodation, access and associated works, land southeast of Arns Farm in Auchterarder. Are there any comments on this particular application? Nope, there are none. Okay, can I ask if it is noted? And it is noted. It is noted. Okay. And the last one in front of us is demolition and erection of sheltered accommodation building with facilitated care, including restaurant, parking, landscaping and associated works, parking, landscaping and associated works at the Atrium 137 Glover Street in Perth. Are there any comments on this? As many hands come up. Can I start with Councillor Simpson, then followed by Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Convener. For those of us who had the misfortune to live there for a little while when this splendid IT was being installed and other things were happening in this building, we'll all be delighted to see the back of it, I would think. But my comment would be that I think I'm delighted to see this come forward, because the best way to revitalise the city of Perth is to bring some people back to live in the city and not build houses round about and cause all the unnecessary traffic jams and problems to bring them in. And I look forward to more applications of this type to bring people back to live in the centre of a city and to revitalise it and stop building whole houses where there isn't any infrastructure. I'll go off my soapbox now.
Thank you, Convener. I totally disagree with my colleague. I liked the atrium. It was 5 minutes nearer Oak Bank, both coming in the morning and going home at night. But like Councillor Simpson, Councillor Band liked it even more because he could walk there. Yeah. But like Councillor Simpson, I'm glad to see that there's a proposal for the site. However, I think my colleague, my Perth South colleague and I would be saying parking, 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 and transport. But a serious point, the car park currently is used by the GP surgery as an exit, and that's going to be I don't know how that's going to play out. Obviously there's a right of access over the ground of some sort or other, but the GP surgery will need to have a solution to that traffic circulation issue. Also, Glover Street is one of the busiest streets, as everybody found out when we were there, convener, one of the busiest streets in the town, and is heavily trafficated, and I just think traffic, parking and traffic circulation, given that the issues that are already on site are really a key point in this.
Okay, that is noted. Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, convener. Given the importance of health and exercise to the older population, it's such a pity that the PH2O project has been binned, because that would have been ideal for residents of this new site.
Is that something you have noted for planning? Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any other comments on this? No. Then in that case, it is... Sorry, Councillor Simpson?
May
yes.
just before we do close, might I make a serious point concerning the disgraceful IT facilities in this building. I've sounded light-hearted before, which I apologise. It is disgraceful that this particular committee and perhaps the LRB have to contend with stuff that flashes off and on, fails, doesn't come on. This is a serious business looking at plans for the public. The public, well, they've all gone now. The public here to see us working at our best, not to see us looking left, looking right. Is it here? Is it not there? Officers, roads engineers can normally work the microphones, but even the microphone there seems to come on when it feels like it. It cannot be beyond the wit of man to get IT to work, and I hope that you will join me in writing a joint letter on behalf of the planning committees to the committee services to see if they can't have this stuff torn out and thrown away and replaced with something, preferably the old stuff we had in the old chamber that never failed, that will come on when you switch it on. We're not asking for the earth, we're not asking for anything particularly complicated, but surely we can get 4 screens to come on. It can't be beyond us.
Absolutely. I accept your comments. I would happily do that, and we will certainly speak about that after. It is very frustrating at the beginning of every meeting. It is one of the things that I check. It is one of the things that I ask for. It is brought up at pre-meetings. It is requested, and we seem to be in the same position month on month. And I agree that it is exceptionally frustrating because we're here to do a very important job, and it fails us at every turn. So I will happily speak to you after the committee, and we will do something along those lines. Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Can I just point out that perhaps this microphone there has been compromised by the fact that that microphone over there has been left on since the last presentation?
That is possible. I don't know if the two are on the same loop, but I will. That is always a possibility. Thank you very much indeed for everyone for your attendance today, and that's it.